Hi everybody, my name is Alicia. In this lesson, we're going to look at how to use apostrophes. Let's get started. Okay, in this lesson, I want to talk about two basic uses of the apostrophe. The things I'm going to talk about in this lesson will cover most basic uses of the apostrophe. There are two categories of use. We're going to look at showing possession, and we're going to look at contractions to show the missing letters in words. Let's start by showing possession with apostrophes. So, to show possession with an apostrophe, you can use apostrophe S after a noun. So this expresses that something belongs to the noun. So let's look at some very basic examples of this. First, my teacher's pen. In this example, we have my teacher as the noun that we have to show possession for. We have the apostrophe here, and then it's followed by S. Next is pen. This shows that the pen is owned by my teacher. We can use apostrophe S to demonstrate this. Let's look at the next example. His sister's car. His sister's car. In this sentence, sister is the person owning something, or rather, his sister. So again, apostrophe S shows the ownership in this situation. The car is owned by his sister. Let's look at the last basic example. It's my father's wallet. My father's wallet. Again, we have apostrophe S after the owner of the object. So here, my father is the owner of the wallet. So we can use apostrophe S to show ownership in this way. But there are some very important rules to keep in mind to make sure that you always express this ownership clearly and correctly. So let's take a look at two key rules for you to follow. Okay, first, number one, if it's a singular noun, so this means if you want to show the possession of something that is a singular noun, that means just one thing or just one person, add apostrophe S to make it plural. Okay? This is true even if the singular noun ends in S. So this part right here is sometimes confusing even for native speakers. You learn sometimes I shouldn't put another S after the noun. When should I do that? I don't know. So this is the rule. So if it's a singular noun, add apostrophe S to make it plural. So let's look at some examples of this. First, the business's plan. The business's plan. In this situation, business is our noun. We want to express something that is owned by the business. So business ends with an S, but it's a singular noun, one business, right? We still have to add apostrophe S to make it plural. I'm sorry, we still have to add apostrophe S to show ownership. This is a singular noun. We're not making it plural here. The business's plan. So this shows the plan owned by the business. Okay, let's look at another example of this. His bus's schedule. His bus's schedule. So again, bus is a singular noun that ends with S. We still have to follow this rule. We add apostrophe S after the bus to show ownership. So this schedule belongs to the bus, or his bus in this case. So it's some kind of connection we're showing here. Here's one more example of this S rule. Her dress's color. Her dress's color. So again, dress is our singular noun. It ends in S. We still have to put apostrophe S to show ownership. So in this case, the dress doesn't actually own the color, of course, but the color is a quality that belongs to the dress. So even if your singular noun ends in S, you need to put an apostrophe S after it to show possession, to show ownership. We saw the same thing up here. So these singular nouns do not end in S, but we have to follow the same rule. So this one is an easy one, right? If you're just talking about one of something, one noun, just put apostrophe S after it to show ownership. Okay, great. So let's continue on to rule number 2. Rule number 2 is a little bit trickier than rule number 1. So let's take a look. Okay, for rule number 2, if it's a plural noun, so plural means more than one of something, if it's a plural noun, use an apostrophe after the S. That means no additional S after it, unless the plural noun does not end in S. So this is kind of tricky. Let's break down what this means. So plural nouns, generally, when we create a plural noun, we simply add S to the end of the noun to make it plural, right? Like teacher becomes teachers, right? Or sister becomes sisters, or father becomes fathers, right? More than one of something. We add an S to the end of it. So if it's a plural noun that follows this rule, just add an apostrophe after the S. You don't need to add apostrophe plus S, just one apostrophe. And it's done, it's finished, it's good. Unless, however, there is an exception, unless the plural noun doesn't end in S. So there are some plural nouns that don't end in S, right? They're special nouns, right? So we'll see an example of this here. So let's take a look at these kinds of examples that we have and break down what's happening. So first one, my parents' house. My parents' house. So in this example, my parents is the noun. This is the plural noun, two people, parents, right? And we have an apostrophe after the S. In this situation, there's no extra S after this because it follows this rule. So the plural noun, parents in this case, just gets an apostrophe here like this, okay? So my parents' house. This shows the house that belongs to my parents. Okay, let's look at the next example. The next example are children's grades. Our children's grades. So this is an example of the exception here. So children is an example of a plural noun that does not end in S, right? We have one child, two children, right? So this is a plural noun that does not end in S. In this situation, we need to use apostrophe S, just as we did with rule number 1, right? So in this situation, when you have a plural noun that doesn't end in S, make sure to add that apostrophe S. So if you want to talk about other things like mice, for example, so the mice is something, we need to add that apostrophe S. So this is a good one to keep in mind when you're writing a sentence that uses those plural nouns that are kind of irregular. Okay? Let's go to the last example, the students' party. The students' party. So here again, we have a regular plural noun. It's just student plus S, right? Students. We again put the apostrophe after students. No additional S because it follows the basic rule part here. So no exception in this case. So keep this one in mind. This one requires a little bit more thought. Just consider that S at the end. Plural noun or singular noun. Those are kind of the two things it's important to keep in mind with this. Okay, so this is what I want to talk about for showing possession, using apostrophes to show possession. Let's go now to part 2. So the other part of today's lesson is using apostrophes to show contraction. So a contraction is the short form or the reduced form of two words generally. So we use apostrophes to show or to kind of represent missing letters. That's one way that you can think of the apostrophe use here. So apostrophes can be used to show the missing letters in words. So what does this mean? Let's take a look at some examples. For example, when we write do not in the reduced form or the contracted form, we use this spelling, right? Don't, D-O-N apostrophe T. So you can think of this apostrophe as kind of a replacement for the letter that's missing, right? So we have do not. O is missing here. It's kind of like we're showing the O is gone with the apostrophe. So don't. Here's another example. We are. We are becomes we're, right? So again, we have a letter missing. In this case, it's the A. We are becomes we're. So the apostrophe shows where that letter used to be. One more example, I am, this becomes I'm. Again, we have a missing letter. The A used to be right here. We have an apostrophe there instead. So apostrophes can be used in this way to show that letters are missing from a word. So these are extremely common. You probably know about these already. But I also want to talk about another use that's typically done in books and other stories, those kinds of things. Sometimes this apostrophe, this missing letter apostrophe, is used at the end of a word, or sometimes even in the middle. It's a little bit rare. Usually this is at the end of a word. But sometimes you'll see an apostrophe at the end of a word to express a way of speaking. So this kind of tends to sound a little more casual, or sometimes this is used to indicate like a character's certain way of speaking. So let's look at some examples so you can see what I mean here. Here's one. I'm thinking about what to make for dinner. I'm thinking about what to make for dinner. So first we have this contracted form, right? The apostrophe here. And then we have this, thinkin', thinkin'. Here, the apostrophe is at the end of the word. So we tend to see this use a lot in ing verbs, actually, verbs that end in ing to show that the G sound is not clearly pronounced. So I'm thinking about what to make for dinner. So this thinkin' is a little bit different from thinking, right? I'm thinking about what to make for dinner would be the standard way to say this, right? But this thinkin' sounds a little bit more casual. People may choose to use this kind of thinking to express a certain kind of casual level of speaking or to express a kind of accent, something like that. So that's what this apostrophe at the end of an ing verb means. It means that G sound is missing. Let's look at another example. We've been walking for hours. We've been walking for hours. So here again, we have this basic contraction. We've been walking for hours. So again, there's this apostrophe at the end of this ing word, right? And the G is missing. So the apostrophe is showing us something is missing and we've cut the word off early. So walking becomes walkin'. Walkin'. We've been walking for hours. So this expresses a kind of rough or casual manner of speaking. One more. You're working hard. You're working hard. You might hear people say this to you at work, like your coworkers might make this comment to you. You're working hard. Again, we have a basic contraction here. You are, right? And here, working. So the standard spelling is working with a G at the end. We have this apostrophe here that shows something is missing. You're working hard. So this sounds kind of more casual, a little more friendly than you're working hard. Okay, so that's what you might see occasionally. Usually we see this in texts like stories and maybe novels, maybe short stories or essays, that kind of thing. But oftentimes people like to speak this way and sometimes they want to text that way as well too. So if you see this in like a text message or something, that's what this apostrophe at the end of the word means. And as I said, you might see it in the middle, I suppose, in certain places. You might even see it at the very beginning of a word, but that's an indicator, that's a sign that someone has cut off usually like a letter or something like that, a very small sound, and they're showing that with the apostrophe. Okay, great. So those are the two key points that I want to talk about for this lesson. We use apostrophes to show possession, and we use apostrophes for contractions to show missing letters. I want to finish this lesson by covering a very common couple of questions, some very common errors, some problem points for learners and for native speakers. This question box right here shows them. They are the differences between it's with an apostrophe, it's with no apostrophe, and whose with an apostrophe S and whose, H-O-S-E at the end here. What is the difference? So let's talk about its and its first. IT apostrophe S means it is. It is. IT no apostrophe S is the possessive. So this is an exception to what I talked about over here. Of course, that's like kind of hard for you to remember, I know, but thankfully it's just this one. There's only one that you need to remember this exception for. So it's with no apostrophe is the possessive form, okay? It is this it with an apostrophe S at the end. So this is one tricky one to remember, okay? Then the second one, this whose question. So W-H-O apostrophe S means who is. Who is. W-H-O-S-E is the possessive. So whose bag is this? Right? We're asking about someone's possession. Whose bag is this? Whose marker is this? We use this W-H-O-S-E word to do that. Whose with an apostrophe S means who is, like who's he talking to, right? That's not a question of possession. So these words sound exactly the same when we are speaking, right? But it's important to remember that they are very different on paper. So keep these small differences in mind because they do matter. Okay, great. So this is a quick introduction to how to use apostrophes. This is a very basic introduction to this very important punctuation mark, but these rules will help you in the majority of situations. So keep this in mind. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, or if you want to practice making some apostrophe words, feel free to do so in the comment section of this video. Also, if you like this lesson, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Also, check us out at EnglishClass101.com for some other things that can help you with your English studies. Thanks very much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time. Bye!